Identity with Tayameaca. Hi and welcome to Explore Your Identity. I am Tayameaca and my guest today is the amazing powerhouse that is Chantelle Lunt. Welcome, Chantelle.
Oh, hi Taya, thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, I've been waiting to have this conversation. And I can't wait for us to delve a little bit more into your identity, who you are, how you identify yourself, and the different elements of Chantelle that have shaped who you are today.
Amazing, can't wait.
Okay, so I always like to start with a bit of your background, like how did we get to Chantelle that I know today?
Origin stories. It's a long origin story, so I'll shorten it. But essentially, I grew up in care. So when I was small, I grew up with my mum in very, very small in LA, so on Windsor Street. And then my mum had substance abuse issues. She was an alcoholic, so me and my brothers were taken into care. And my brothers went into care together, and I went into care on my own. And I ended up living with an amazing woman who is my mother, Joan Edison. But I lived in Halewood, and so my experience of blackness was a lot different to what my experience of blackness would have been if I'd stayed in LA and in Toxteth as I was when I was a child. So I grew up kind of with two different stigmas at play, with the identity as someone who was in care and who didn't live with the parents and had, that kind of challenge from that perspective, but then also someone who was visibly different, because while Halewood and areas outside of, Liverpool are diversifying quite rapidly now, back then, like Halewood's a village, we were literally the only black people in the village, and that wasn't perceived as something that was a good thing. So in terms of kind of identity, the things that I am really comfortable and like are just such a key part of my identity now were the things that I just wanted to hide away when I was younger. Like, I didn't want to be in care. I wanted to just have a normal family, like, all of my friends. I didn't want to be black. I wanted them to stop touching my hair and to stop saying things about me that, or physically harming me because I was black. So when I was younger, I used to try and sort of minimise those things. So, like, a real key example is I used to get really tired of people touching my hair and, and making a big issue about my hair being curly. So I started relaxing my hair and making it straight to try and fit in, and also to make people stop touching it. I'd never really mention the food my mum cooked at home, which was sometimes, jollof rice and things like that. I wouldn't mention that because that was different. I wouldn't mention the different things that I needed for my skin, or the fact that, my mum used to speak to us about Africa and the continent and all of those things, because those things made me different. So you, as like a defense mechanism, if you grow up somewhere where quite quickly you learn that difference is not perceived well by your peers, then you try to be as the same as everyone else as possible. And when you're a black person, you can't change your skin colour, you can't. So you change your behaviours, you change anything you can about your hair. You don't talk about those things. And so I remember like getting, real overt racism. So having kids pick on me to fight with me because they perceived that I was tough because I was black, or kids like verbally abusing me with like, racial slurs. And I always remember the first time I heard the N word, going to my mum and being like, I didn't know what the word meant, but I knew the way it was being said to me, and I knew how it made me feel, and I knew it wasn't a nice word. And then she told me what it meant, and she told me about racism, the talk the young people quite often had to have at an early age. So I was very, very young. I think I was about 7 or 8. And then I was a bit like, we had like a road that was a circular road, so you could go that way around the right to school, and me and my sister used to walk to school, or we could go the other way. And the girl did not live the other way, and I just said, well, I'm just going to go the other way. And my mum was like, you can go the other way, that's fine, babe, but, you will see this throughout your life, and what you can either try and hide from it, or you can learn to walk with your head held high and be proud of who you are. And I feel like that kind of started to pave the way for me, of that kind of being proud of my identity and being like, okay, I'm different, but different doesn't mean bad. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Just because I have a different household structure, just because I look different, that's not bad. And so it wasn't an overnight thing. It was a very long journey. It's a very hard journey to embrace your identity when you're in a place where nobody wants you to do that. But I always remember like this key turning point was years later when, I was working and I was in my 20s, and my son had an experience of racism, and we went to the International Slavery Museum to show him all the black heroes that were on the wall and really talk to him about his heritage. And I'd relaxed my hair since like the age of like 9 right through to my 20s, and I was just, I think I was maybe 7 months away from getting married, so I was continuing to relax my hair. And just that day after taking him to the museum and being like, you know, as a black person, I want you to be proud of who you are, I just literally stopped relaxing my hair. I just never did it again. And so when I got married with like my natural hair, and that was just such a big thing for me, that kind of, and I just, I just became really comfortable with who I am. But I feel like that, you know, that those formative years, like my mum, like my foster mum, was just this real, she was the only black person in the village, but she didn't give an inch of her identity just because she was surrounded by people who hated her identity. She really lent into it more, and so she taught us to lean into it more. But she understood that as a young person, it's a bit of the journey might be more difficult. So like even things like, I've got a necklace, is it on me now? Yeah, my African necklace. Yeah. That's something that she wore when we were kids, and I always remember when I was really younger, it used to make me like cringe that she'd turn up with it on her neck and people could see it. And like, as I got older, it was one of the things that made me proudest about it, and she knew that I loved it so much. So like when she passed away, she left it to me, and it's like one of the things I wear with pride, and like I'm really visible in my identity now, and it's just like that kind of journey is really powerful. But when I did then go on to experience racism, I was in a place of there is no compromise about, like I'm not giving an inch of my identity, and I'm basically, the systems have to change. I do not have to change as a person. So I feel like that kind of, those formative years of becoming who I was, it was a long journey, but it made me realise that we were never in the wrong for just being who we were. It was society that was in the wrong for seeing us as a threat or something to, you know, to mock.
Yes. So at what age were you when you left Toxteth? Was it 8?
So I was a baby, so I was 1 when I left Toxteth.
Oh, so you don't really have like a comparison in terms of how people treated you?
I did actually, because then when I was 13, my mum moved back. Okay. So we lived in Toxteth from the age of 13, I think, through to like 16, 17. So then there was a lot of me realising that my identity in terms of how it had been shaped by being in Halewood was a lot different to identities of people who've been, you know, it's a privilege to be able to grow up amongst people who look like you and people who, you know, where race isn't that big of an issue because you're surrounded by people. So it was a big change.
That's good. So does that mean that for you, was your experience in Toxteth, in terms of your identity, would you say it was more positive in Toxteth or in Halewood?
This is the aspect of someone who doesn't grow up in a diverse area that a lot of people struggle with, because then by the time I went back to L8, I had behaviours and parts about me, because still I had, you know, I hadn't completed this journey that came about around the age of 20 where people will point to me and go, oh, you act like a white person. So they would tell me that I didn't fit in there either. And so for me, there was this real struggle to forge an identity, because I was like, I didn't fit in this white area because people visibly, you know, point me out. But now I don't fit in where I feel like I should fit in a black area, because people are recognising those behaviours and these traits, and they're saying that they're not synonymous to blackness. So I was like, I don't think I fit in here. And so I think that's why it was such a long journey, because then as I went into my 20s, I was like, well, actually, I don't really have to fit into anyone's really rigid definition of what blackness is. I'm black because I'm black. I experience blackness because of the colour of my skin, and no one can take my blackness away from me because I experience it as it's within. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to take all of my lived experiences and form the identity that I want, and, you know, like learn about my dad who lives in the Cameroon, but embrace all parts of my identity. And my blackness doesn't have to look like, you know, be it a black person or a white person, like anyone's expectation of a black person, because it's when you get into that like stereotypical thinking that actually that doesn't benefit anyone, because we're not a monolith, we're all different. And so just because you might see a black person on television, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be like that black person. So I think it gave me the confidence to be like, my blackness is informed by my experience of living in Toxteth and my experience of, you know, living in Halewood and my experience of having family in South London. So it's informed by all of those things, but it's very unique to me. But one thing I am now is unapologetic. People can perceive me however they want, but I am who I am, and I don't make any apologies for it.
And who is Chantelle?
Oh, who is Chantelle? That's a big question.
It is, right?
I think for me, I'm someone who feels very strongly about social justice, and I think that comes from experiencing, when you've experienced injustice for a long time, and when you've been marginalised for a long time, and when so for me there were two competing identities. There's my identity as a child growing up in care and my black identity. And a lot of those experiences intersect, but I was experiencing them both at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think when there's this perception of children in care as naughty, or, there's something different about them and we don't like it. And equally, there's similar perceptions about black people. So when you experience that for a long time, it can make you, at times, it made me shy away and just be like, I just wish everyone would treat me normally. But then I think as you grow up, it's a bit like, no, I wish it's the world that needs to change, and it's the world that needs more understanding, and I'm kind of going to unapologetically be who I am, and I'm going to fight for my right to exist as a person and to achieve all those things that other people are allowed to achieve. And then you recognise that injustice when other people experience it, so then you have a lot of empathy towards people. And so I think that need to be part of the change that I've known has been needed since I was a child. It's felt really strongly in me, so that's why I feel very comfortable within social justice movements, and why I feel I've never really gravitated. So I've always worked in public service. So I've worked in children's services and children's centres for 12 years. I've been a police officer for 2 years, and now I work in the education department for JMU. I've always gravitated more towards jobs that make me feel like I can make a change and support people. I've never really gravitated towards jobs where I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire. It's always been about, for me, the cause and the ability to make a change and support people. So that's something that seems to have come about from that, that lived experience of knowing what it's like to be marginalised.
So take me back to like your 20s, you're back in Toxteth, and that journey from you deciding what career path to take. I can imagine that must have been a bit of a challenge for you. Like, did you have like any particular role models that fit into your uniqueness, or how did you forge that path, like to decide that, okay, this is what I want to do? And
so for me, it was like my teens, right? So part of my journey as well was like experience real, actual, I don't want to call it hardship, but real trauma. So my foster mum was a real protective factor for many, many years. But then when we got to 16, she became unwell and was medically retired. So the social services were like, you can't foster anymore. And then we were taken away from L8 into a lot of different homes. I ended up becoming homeless, and then ended up being placed with my family. Around that time, a few years before, me birth mum had died, so I was going through a lot of trauma. I'd lost one of the biggest stabilising influences in my life, and I just completely plummeted. I got into drugs, drink. There were a lot of people who were really manipulative around me. Even though my mum was retired, she could just see, like, social services just did not care. They placed me with family members who I shouldn't have been living with. And that's why I basically was like, the places I'm living are unsafe. It's safe to just sleep on the street, because then I know no one's going to do anything. And so my mum sort of seen this, and she was just like, listen, come back. Like, we just won't tell the social workers, because they seem to think that taking you away is like a better option. So she brought me back, and thankfully, and when we think about the pathways, my pathway could have easily led to serious substance abuse. It could have led to long-term homelessness. It could have led to a lot of things. And thankfully, because my mum was this protective influence, she was just like, right, let's get you in place. So she helped me get a house, and she did all that work about, okay, what do you want to do? And she's always worked with young people, not just as a foster carer, but like, she'd always done youth work. She's always done work in children's homes. And even when we lived in Halewood, she was like the person who had a door open. All of the kids from the estate would just be in our house. She'd do big street parties. She was that kind of person. And I loved seeing that kind of work with young people. And I was like, do you know what? I want to see if I can work with children and young people and do what you do, And so then I got my first job at 17 in children's centres. And like, there was at that time I got a job that was an unqualified job. I had no qualifications. It was a low paid job. And just through building myself up and building me kind of me self-belief, and through me mum being, even though I wasn't living with her and she'd helped me to get a flat, being on hand to support me and to guide me, I was like, so because me birth mum had died when I was 14, I completely tanked my GCSEs. I had no I had a few qualifications, but I got the confidence to be like, okay, I'll get qualifications while I'm at that job. So for the 12 years while I was in the children's centre, I got both my MVQs, which meant that I could get a promotion, and I went from a nursery assistant to a nursery nurse, as they were called, looking after children. But then I went up to a community worker doing family support and family link working. I got me both MVQs, which one of them was equivalent to an A level. I did GCSE and got my first A in Spanish. Never thought I could get an A. And it just, every little thing gave me more and more confidence. And then that was why I was like, okay, I want to help people even more, because I've been doing a lot of help at a community level, loads of work with families who, you know, needed support. I was like, oh, I'll join the police, and that's like an even better way of helping people. So then I managed to get into the police, and I was like really, really, really happy, because I thought I could help the community. But that did not go the way I planned for it to go.
And were you based around Liverpool?
So yeah, working in children's centres, I worked in children's centres in South Liverpool, some off Smithtown, and then in Anfield, so I got a real world view. And then when I joined the police, I joined Merseyside, so I was based all around Merseyside. So I've always been close to the city.
And do you feel that your experience within the police force made you a better person, or not so good, or how was it for you in terms of shaping who you are today?
I think at the time it was a hellish experience. So I experienced systematic and relentless bullying for 9 months, to the point that I was almost suicidal. But once again, the bit for me was, had I changed my behaviour, so it's very clear in the police that it's a racist, misogynistic institution. And when I was in there, I was challenging it. I was saying, okay, this isn't okay, what you're doing. These names aren't okay. These memes aren't okay. This behaviour's not okay. You know, young Chantelle would never have done that. I would have just kept my head down and visited him. But Chantelle, who'd done all of that identity work and was really like, no, this is not how we change things, was like, no, I'm confident in who I am, and I know that this is not right, and I want you to change. But they did not want to change. So then I became the target of bullying, and I was a bit like, for me, if there was the potential, if I felt there was the potential to change from within, I would have done it. But even the act, so I never really at that time considered myself an activist, and people often ask, oh, when did you become an activist? And I think, well, I was off sick 9 months into the job, like thinking, A, I just don't want to continue anything, but B, I just want to get as far away from that place as possible. And then something said to me, but what about the next Chantelle that walks into that force? What is she going to go through? And that voice was the reason that I wrote a really comprehensive report describing what happened. That report was then crimes, and although nothing happened, it was a piece of evidence that showed how systemic racism operates within the force. And going back in and saying, actually, do you know what, I'm not going to keep quiet about what's happening. This is what's happening. This is what your officers are doing to people like me and to women, and I want you to do something about it. That was actually my first activist act, because I was standing up in rooms full of white people who were all telling me it was in my head, going, no, it's not in my head, this is a real issue.
And you know what's interesting? I actually have a friend that has got a similar description to you, and a very similar experience within the police force. So when I listen to you, like, it's like listening to her story, and then the same thing told her, it's in her head. Yeah.
And that's gaslighting. I didn't even know that was the word for it. I just knew that I was like, I am not imagining this. I've got quite a comprehensive, you know, like, and writing the report helped me to understand, because it was a lot of issues where I was like, oh, was that just an accident? Oh, what, am I reading too much into that? Oh, and then there was clear issues where I was like, okay, that's definitely racist. That's like, there's no writing that one off. But then writing it and putting all the incidents together and being like, okay, this isn't just racist, it's targeted, and it's, you know, it's systemic, was another thing. So I then didn't leave. I stayed for another year to try and just see if things would get better. And while they got better for me individually, systems, practices, they weren't improving, nothing was improving. And so I just made the decision that this isn't the space where I'm going to make a positive change. This isn't the space where I can do those things that I wanted to do, which is really scary when you've worked very hard to get to a certain position and to do something. And I knew I was inspiring people. Like, people would see me and be like, oh my God, it's amazing to see someone like you. And that makes it even harder when your community is saying, oh my God, amazing. And you're like, this is hell, I've got to leave. But for me, staying sort of fed into the lie that the police were actually truly diverse and inclusive, and I didn't want to be a part of that lie. So that led me to kind of be like, okay, I now have qualifications, maybe I can get a degree. Like, so then I went to uni. While I was in uni, George Floyd was murdered, and it just spoke to all of those things that I've been raising in the police and all those things that I knew about the police force. And in the UK at the time, there was still this narrative, there was still the bad apple narrative, there was still this idea that the UK police were nothing like American police. And I was like, well, I have lived experience and, you know, all of this knowledge that I know that this is a lie. And I thought, well, actually, you need to be a part of this. You need to be a part of this.
And what were you studying at the time?
So I was doing criminology and sociology. So I had the knowledge as well as the lived experience.
Yes.
To kind of.
And what was your plan? Like after you study, what were you planning to do with it, or you were just kind of trying?
I was studying just because I never had the chance to go to university when I was 18. When I was 18, I was literally cleaning toilets while my mates were going to university, were coming into nightclubs and giving me pity. You know, black women in the toilet roll, that was me. And they were giving me pity and looks and pounds. So when I was 18, going to university to me was as far away as going to the moon. So I went to university, like a lot of people go to the university for a job. I went because it was something that I'd always wanted to do that was just so far away from me. But then while I was at university, I was just following me kind of vibe of wanting to do my own business. So I was also upcycling and building a mobile juice and smoothie bar, and I was working at festivals and events, and I was just, to be honest, I was just enjoying myself just following me bliss, doing things that I liked and being creative in terms of, you know, turning business ideas into tangible mobile juice and smoothie bars and just following that. So to be honest, while I was at uni, I was validating a lot of the things that I knew about the police through education, but I was also just, I feel like, enjoying myself in terms of doing what I liked and making an income from just like doing something that was just nice.
So you mentioned how the whole George Floyd situation kind of led you on a path.
Yeah, so we were in lockdown, and then, you know, as if that wasn't bad enough, it became blatantly obvious that systemic racism was just completely peak in the Western world. And I was sat there with all of my internal knowledge that I knew a lot of people didn't have of policing, and all of this lived experience. And I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was like, a lot of black people went through this. I could not sleep after seeing. I just couldn't. It was in my mind.
I was traumatized as well. And what's funny for me is I'd also had some racial situation that happened to me in a previous job. Yeah. So it was just like the timing was just like I could so relate to it at that time.
Yeah. And that's what we actually spoke to I did a podcast with a psychologist, Dr. Marvin Irobo, and he said that's actually a collective community trauma. So it was a real thing. We were being re-traumatized, even though it didn't happen to us. A lot of black people will have had something that resonated with what was happening and that feeling of injustice. And I feel like just collectively we were all just like, no.
Definitely. Like it was collective.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And it was just, and I think because we weren't at work and there was nowhere to go with those feelings, we were all just like, we have to do something. So like my son's on like a shielding list because he's got like health needs. So I couldn't actually physically take these emotions anywhere. So I was just doing like a lot of online work, and a lot of people were like, found it really helpful, the resources that I was putting out there, the writing, the articles, to really explain what systemic racism looks like, because we were still very much in a place of people were just like, oh, well, that person's not calling you the M-word, or they've not hit you, so it's not racism. And I was like, no, racism is a lot more nuanced than that. People are clever. They know they will lose their jobs if they hit you or call you the M-word, but they can cause just as much harm through what I call palatable racism. You know, it's called unconscious bias now or something like that. But that subtle racism that is just, it stings just as much, but it's a lot harder to point to and say this is racism. So I was doing like a lot of educational work about that. And I kind of was like, okay, what about if we set up like a really structured movement? So BLM came from a place of wanting to work, because we had so much support from the LGBTQ plus community. All I remember was it happens in Pride Month, and essentially a lot of my like LGBTQ plus comrades and friends just gave their platforms and their space and everything they could to what was happening. And I was like, oh, that was like in June, and that was supposed to be, you know, that's supposed to be Pride Month, and they were just like, well, there's the bigger issue here and we have to be allies. And I was like, that allyship is so strong. So that's why it was Merseyside BLM Alliance. And from setting the group up, it just sort of soared from there in terms of mobilising people. After Parker came off the shielding list, we got out there and you know, did events, and we did shared solidarity events. But a key theme was the intersectional black experience, that we're not all the same, but B, you experience blackness and racism differently. If you are a black woman, a black person with disabilities, a black LGBTQ plus person, you experience it differently. You have different things that put you at risk or protect you depending on those demographics. And so it became really, really big. And then we did loads of national activism, international activism. It's been a real blur. During that, I was finishing my degree. I then went on to get my master's, and we sort of moved into setting up Mid-Sized Alliance for Racial Equality, which is a CIC, because it felt like, and it was, to be honest with you, BLM just came from a place of reacting to feeling under attack and just needing to be reacting to racism and doing that on the ground activism. But, you know, as we know, it's through like educational and sustainable work and community work that we truly get that kind of understanding that ends the cycle of racism. So we were like, we still need BLM. We still need that space of being able to go out and just be on the street and to just be responding, because black people are still being killed, black people are still being harmed. So while that is still happening, we will always need a strong reactive activist movement. But we also need the kinds of, you know, the educational community-based movements. So we set up Mid-Sized Alliance for Racial Equality to do that educational work. And that's been really, really good. That's been a different kind of activism, but just, you know, just as powerful. Yeah. And then, yeah, so that's kind of, it just came from this need. I didn't really know 100% what it would look like. You know, we all make mistakes. I got some things wrong in the beginning, but it was from a place of needing to change and just being willing to do anything possible to make that change, and so that, like, you know, our children don't grow up in a place where just because of the colour of the skin, the more, you know, we know the statistics, 7 times more likely to die in police custody, 7 times more likely to die if you're a black mother. All of those statistics, I don't want them for my children. So I'm happy to hand over my whole life to this movement if it means that they don't have to experience what we went through.
Yeah, I really feel that eventually, like long term, we will get to a place where things will be better. But I almost feel like this was just kind of the tip of the iceberg, and there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'm glad that you've got like that, besides the BLM, you've got that CIC. Yeah. Because I've seen the posters around. So I would love to look at that a bit more.
Definitely.
Because I have seen like stuff about it that you post and stuff, but I've never really like looked into it as much. So currently, what's your current path? Any interesting projects you're currently working on? Or
so my path has gone more into academia. So I did quite well in me masters and me undergrad, and so I managed to get a funded PhD place, but also a job at LJMU. So I'm doing lecturing and I'm doing my PhD research. I feel like I've got a lot going on in terms of outside of my research in the Black civil rights movement, and I feel like I'm doing a lot of work on that. But there's still that part of me. I will always be that kid that grew up in care. And like, I recently sort of saw someone who I grew up in care with, and it like really, it just struck home how different my pathway could have gone. Like, she didn't have a Joan Edison, and she's ended up on the street with substance abuse issues, and I just felt really, really just heartbroken, because that is the path, that's a reality for a lot of people who grow up in care. So I'm actually researching the educational journeys of children in care, with the hope that it will do something to improve outcomes, and it'll do something to help more people who grew up in care to get to uni, because currently around 50% of the youth population go to university if you are white, even more so if you're black, believe it or not. The care experience people, it's 6% of the care experience population go to university, and half of them drop out within the first year. So it's like a very small minority are getting to university, and then an even smaller minority are actually getting any kinds of formal, you know, higher educational degree. And it doesn't have to be like that. You know, years ago, they were the statistics for working class people and people of colour, but there was a concerted effort of, you know, we're going to change this. So I feel like, as one of the few people who grew up in care who's managed to get somewhere within higher education, it just feels like it's something that I really want to do that work and to do everything I can to kind of improve educational outcomes, which directly leads to improved life outcomes and directly leads to, you know, a better life experience for people in care. So that's me work and educational stuff. I've just been recruited as a member of the National Alliance for Police Accountability Steering Group. So
amazing.
That's a national organisation chaired by Lee Jasper. They had the launch in Lambeth a few weeks ago, which I was down for. And essentially it's a coalition, a national coalition of black people to try and have police reform that is led by the community, rather than police officers telling us what we need. Actually, us as a community going to our community and saying, what do you need?
Yeah, I think I actually saw a little bit about that.
Yeah.
I'll ask you more about it.
Yeah, it was
afterwards.
in the news. Mina Smallman came to who's the mum of Bieber Henry, Nicole Smallman. She was at the launch and got a lot of media coverage.
I saw something on Instagram, I think.
Yeah,
about it.
Yeah.
Was it like in their HQ or?
It was, so we've done a few things. We have I went to Parliament and had a meeting with senior officers about recruitment, and I was essentially told them what I thought about that.
Yeah.
And then we had the launch, which was I think a week later, and that was in Lambeth, and this was in Lambeth Town Hall, so that was a community location deliberately, and there were a lot of officers there, and we wanted them to be listen to the community. So that was a community based launch, but then the week before we'd done stuff in the House of Commons with the senior officers.
Oh, lovely. And is there any notable achievements that you have that we should know about? I mean, like so far, just listening to your journey, I can see like you probably don't look at them as achievements, but just listening to you, I can see how much you've achieved so far on your journey.
So for me, I mean, I feel like my achievements aren't probably what people would be like most people would be like, that's not really achievement. But for me, like a big one was education, because it was such a thing that I thought I'd missed out on. And as I say, when I was 18, it just never felt like I'd ever get there.
I can completely relate to that.
Yeah.
About the going to uni. And
it is. It sometimes it just feels like it's something that everyone else can do, but you can't, because there's so many just immediate, like breathing and eating issues that you have to deal with. So go on.
So if you could like speak to your younger self, to the younger Chantelle, like what would you have said to her? What would you have wanted to hear? I definitely just have wanted her to know that where you are at is no indication of where you can go. Like when you're younger, it's just, and like this, I think this is like a big part of why I wanted to work with young people, because I'm always saying it to them. You just haven't got enough bandwidth to know that what is happening today. Like, for me, and I was like, really not in a good place when I was younger, but I was like, I have nowhere to live. I have no one. Like, how am I ever going to get anything? And, it wasn't even in my head that years later I would be sat here as someone with, 2 degrees, a stable job, a homeowner with husbands and, all of that stuff, because that just was never in my head. And it's like, I'd just love to go back to it and say, just keep moving and keep it in your head that it can be, because the second it falls out of your head that that's a possibility. It took years for those aspirations to come back into my head. It was like I was almost scared to dream it, to believe it, to think it, because I couldn't see how it was going to happen. But a big part of that for me, before it even happened, I was, again, it's in this like 20s transformation that I had, but I was telling myself, and every time I got a little bit, I was like, well, why can't you be this? So like right now my dreams are huge, and I make no apologies for that, because to get from where I was to where I am, while by other people's standards I'm not really anywhere special, but for me, I have travelled so far, so I'm like, you can go even further and just keep pushing. So like, I'm proud of my educational achievements, and recently I got elected as Halewood's first Black Town Councillor. Congratulations. Now that was an achievement. Not that you don't already have many, but that's amazing.
I was really proud of that, especially for an area like Halewood, because I was like, Labour asked me to stand, and I was like, I'll stand, but I did feel a bit like, I don't think they're going to vote a black woman in. We haven't had a black councillor for 21 years.
Wow.
We've never had a black woman councillor, so I was like, I'll vote, I'll do all the stuff, but I didn't go to the count, because I really didn't think they were going to vote. And it was do you know Vanessa Boateng at all?
Yes, I know
she's
Vanessa.
Knowsley Village's first Black Town councillor.
Yes.
And she messaged me and she was like, where are you, councillor? And I went, what? And I was like,
wow.
She went, you've been elected. And I was like, oh, okay then.
That's amazing.
So that I'm really proud of that. And then like I got nominated for an award with the BBC as well. What's it called? BBC Make a Difference Awards, to the ceremonies in September.
Are you going?
I am going to go to that.
Oh, brilliant.
But
are you coming to 7th Street for your dress?
Oh, do you know what listen, I've got a few things that I'm going to 7th Street. I've got an event coming up, and I've got 2 events in September, so I am coming to 7th Street because you have dressed me before, and it probably
was iconic, right?
It's the best I've looked in my life.
Oh, amazing. So what's next?
So next, it's going to be, obviously, I've got 4 years of doing this PhD. I really want to use it, though. You know, working in the education department, I'm working on a project to bring young people in care into the university to do, and you know, I've mentioned it to both of you, that aspirational work of this is what you can be, because I just want them to dream big. So working with young people, with me, we're working on improving health outcomes for Black and global majority people. So we're doing project work on that, building a network and delivering training, and we're also doing work in, you know, those outlying areas like Knowsley, where I grew up, where they're getting really, really diverse, and you know, there's no kinds of work in terms of with the community, so the hostility still has the potential to be there. So we're trying to, you know, do empowerment work and do educational work, so the, you know, the young Chantelles don't have to think that growing up brown is a bad thing, because it's it's the best thing about me. I absolutely love being Black, and I just don't want people, just because you're growing up in that area doesn't mean you have to feel ashamed of who you are. So we're going to be doing work around there. And then just kind of counsellor stuff, so working on green strategies, and working, so we're doing Culture Fest in Knowsley. And one of the first things I suggested when I went into the meeting was, okay, Culture Fest happens, it starts on June the 22nd. June 22nd is Windrush Day. Let's have a commemoration event and a flag go up for Windrush. So like, I'm already trying to, you know, to make our culture more diverse and make it representative of the community.
Amazing. And how do people connect with you?
So I am on all social media in different guises. So I think I am at Chantelle_Lunt on Twitter, and then on Instagram I'm Chantelle Lunt. And I am on Facebook, but I think we're all moving away from Facebook, aren't we?
Awesome. So just to make it a little bit more lighthearted,
go on.
I've got like 6 fun questions for you. What's one weird or unusual thing in your purse or bag?
So today, I'm going to give this to you, by the way, Taya. I have a unicorn in my bag.
Lovely. My children like unicorns.
Yes, it's me husband's into resin. I don't know if you know about.
Oh yes.
So he's made a resin unicorn.
Oh, that sounds sweet.
I know. He started making this jewellery as well with it.
Lovely. That's amazing.
So I'm made up. So I've got all this jewellery coming in, and then he's making me lovely statues and stuff. But the one that I've got, I was like, that totally looks like a Taya statue. So you're gonna have that one to get from me. You're welcome.
And what item of clothing would you say you're emotionally attached to?
I am emotionally attached to slippers. So for me, there's kind of a switch off when I get home, and I love just getting out of like workwear and stuff and just putting soft stuff on. But for me, slippers, I just love, you know, those whole ones that cover you, like they're like boots.
Oh yes, they are comfy in winter though, aren't they?
Yes, I love them. So they're my little comfort item of clothing.
Oh cool. Now I'm going to pick your brain.
Oh, go on.
What is your definition of fashion?
Oh, well, I think fashion is very individual, but I think for me, fashion is an expression of who I am, but also how I'm feeling.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I like colours, I like stuff that represents my heritage, and I like stuff that kind of, I feel, not only represents my personality, but my mood. So sometimes, like, today I'm a little bit colourful. Yeah. Sometimes I'm, like, just black. Just so
but the hair is always colourful.
The hair is always colourful.
Oh, lovely. And what do you like shopping for?
So me fit. Do you know what? I've never been a shoes person, but I've always been a bags person. So I really do enjoy bags. It's probably bags are my favourite thing.
I'm just in everything person. Everything. And what do you hate shopping for?
Shoes, it's probably only because I don't like getting my feet out in public, and like you always need to know, don't you? So I'm always like, you'll find me in the corner when no one's there, just kind of trying to try shoes on when no one's looking. So I don't like the process of shoe shopping, but I like bag shopping.
And do you have a favourite brand or shop or label that you like to shop for? Or
obviously 7th Street.
Oh, thank
number
you.
one. And then I do like I am a bit
no bias,
no bias, but you are amazing, and I love just like the Afrocentric fashion. It's amazing. Then I like vintage. I like H&M, and I like River Islands. I sort of mix vintage with like, you know, actual high street fashion. But I kind of like that. And then occasionally, like, Instagram's amazing. You find, like...
Oh, inspiration.
Yeah, you find people who make, like, one of a kind. So there's, like, this woman who makes cardigans and things. She's called Freezing with Style, and I love it. But she's moved to Portugal. So yeah, I like quirky and contemporary as well.
Oh, awesome. And the last question, have you got any fashion related questions for me?
Okay, Taya.
Random.
I do. So I have an event coming up, and the sort of the fashion stipulation is black tie Afrocentric.
Oh.
I'm going, and I'm going with my partner who is white, and he's a bit like, okay, and the guy's like, oh no, it's fine, everyone wears something, but I'm a bit like, okay, I think you should be really subtle, but I'm also like, what would one wear to a black tie Afrocentric event as an interracial couple?
So what I'm saying is, you were speaking, I could visualize he's wearing his black tie, but with the accessories. So maybe like a little, you've got your dress.
Yeah.
And then he's got the same print as a hanky or as a bow or something, but quite subtle.
Yeah.
Or even if it's just a tie.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was like subtle. Just a hint.
Just a little nod to what you're wearing.
Yeah,
that would,
that's amazing, actually. Yeah, a little.
Yeah,
because I'm giving a speech at it, but he's me plus one.
Yeah.
So, amazing.
And that's like, you'll be well coordinated without overwhelming him.
Yeah. Amazing. And we'll be definitely coming to your shop. So
lovely. So we've come to the end of our episode today. Thank you all for listening, and let's continue to promote inclusivity, collaboration, and positive change. Together we can take on the world. Explore your identity with Tayameaca.